Hi, I'm Martin Shumton. Super excited to be here and joined by Zoltan Istvan, who is running for president in USA this year for the Transhumanist Party. So we connected on Google+. Peter Feltham here is here as well. David Amland may turn up. And because we're so into our tech, just thought this is a wonderful opportunity to, well, firstly, welcome Zoltan a bit more into the community and to connect people up with him. And you're on the mainstream screen now, Zoltan, and you know I'm a geek in this area, so this is a delight for me. So thanks for spending the time. Do you want to give a quick background of who you are and what you've done to date?
Yeah, sure. Well, as you mentioned, my name is Zoltan Istvan. I'm an American, even though I have a Hungarian name, and I am currently running for the U.S. presidential position under the Transhumanist Party, which is a newly formed political entity that is aiming to kind of put health, technology, and science at the forefront of American politics. And we tackle very thorny issues. But I'm also a writer. I've been an adventurer. I'm an entrepreneur, and I think perhaps mostly I'm a futurist. So I do a lot of discussions, speeches, and articles on futurist topics. But transhumanism is certainly my specialty.
Awesome. Okay, let's start with the basics. What is transhumanism?
Sure. Well, transhumanism is really an international social movement that essentially is trying to use science and technology to radically improve and radically modify the human being and the human experience. But more importantly, I think Latin-wise, transhuman means beyond human. So most transhumanists are just trying to use technology to kind of leave behind whatever it means to be human, their biological selves, disease, suffering, and especially death. I think the #1 goal of transhumanists is to try to over mortality.
See, for a lot of people, I think everybody watching this will probably know that I've been into this for a while. But a lot of people go, come on, and yet you've got people like Google that are investing in firms that aim is to provide what we need in order for it to life extension programs and potentially longer term extend that. So people are into this. This is the point. It's not, you're not one man out on your own. You've got a lot of support and a lot of people are around because they can see there is a movement.
Absolutely. It's a massive movement at this point. Even a few years ago, it was considerably smaller. But what's happening is there's so much media surrounding life extension and also just technology in general to improve the human being. You're talking bionic hearts, you're talking artificial limbs, we're talking exoskeleton suits, bionic eyes, mind-reading headsets where you don't even have to talk and something can read just your brain waves. So transhumanism has sort of come of age in the last 2 years, and all of a sudden everyone around the world is paying attention to it. And you have a younger generation that loves it because of virtual reality and because of all the apps on their smartphones. You have an older generation that loves it because it's enabling them to live far longer. And then you have just everyone in general saying, well, this is pretty bizarre stuff, but it's very exciting stuff as well.
Okay, so we're the lovers on it. We love. So I guess out there, you're running for president. How has it been received? We touched on this just before, but what's happening?
Well, certain parts of the country are receiving it not so well. I think the main thing to remember about America is that it's about 75 to 80% Christian. And Christianity says that you must, that you're going to meet your God in its afterlife if you're kind of a good person. Well, transhumanists mostly aren't worried about any afterlife. In fact, they're trying to make the most of this life, and most transhumanists really don't want to die. It doesn't mean they want to live forever, but pretty much they want they want the power over death, and so they tend to not be a very religious group. And that is kind of I think one of the central issues of my campaign and the Transhumanist Party is that there is a religious kind of confrontation occurring. So I have had my share of hate mail. I've had my share of death threats and stuff like that. And that said, transhumanism does welcome all religions. The Transhumanist Party is open to all religions. There is a Christian Transhumanist Association as well. So I'm trying to minimize the conflict. But, as you can imagine, parts of the middle of America, which are more fundamentally religious, have found my campaign not only upsetting, but just really, like I said, giving death threats on Twitter and stuff like that, saying, hey, you shouldn't be doing what you're doing. So on the West and East Coast, though, I think it's been received very well, and we've gotten some pretty broad attention. I'm pretty excited how big the Transhumanist Party has grown. Just so your viewers know, there are now approximately 25 nationalist transhumanist parties around the world, and that means kind of Germany has one, England has one, Australia, Brazil. We're represented on 5 continents, so it's not just America that has a transhumanist party. In the last 6 months, there have spread to around 25 internationally, and it's exciting. It's a huge amount of people joining very quickly.
Amazing. Now I can see that Peter's got a prop on. I don't know whether we wanted to say something with the prop, whether it's related to some Indians. I know you by now, Peter. Go on.
It's the religious wingnuts. I'm sorry, but they got me.
That's what the reference was. Okay, right, we're good. So, what are your influences, Zoltan? What are your what books? Are you a Kurzweil man? I interviewed Thomas Frey. That was great from Impact Lab as well. So, yeah. Who are you?
You know, I got to be honest. I try not to have influences. I think I built my career upon my novel, The Transhumanist Wager, which is this very kind of authoritarian, they say Ayn Randian. It's not my personality necessarily, but I did build a lot of my futures career on this, what I think many people would call a very heavily libertarian type novel.
Yeah.
And that sort of became very popular and is still one of the more popular books now in transhumanism. But that said, I'm probably a much nicer person than the book would show, and it is a novel after all. So, but the reason I mention is that I didn't actually, for 4 years, I made a very strong point of not reading any transhumanist literature, not following anyone, just writing my novel and writing my ideas, which contain an comprehensive philosophy in it called teleological egocentric functionalism. It enabled me to kind of move outside of the idea of any mentors or influences. So I would say that a lot of my writing now, and I have 3 national columns, Huffington Post, Psychology Today, and Vice. I write very strange, bizarre stuff. My last article was, do we have free will because God killed itself? I mean, this is way beyond simulation theory. This is now going into some of the more furthest reaches of metaphysical ideologies. So I am trying not to be influenced so that I can remain someone that is creative enough that comes up with interesting ideas that people like to hear.
I like that. That's great. I've written that. So teleological, egocentric. What was the last bit?
Functionalism.
Functional. You're not going to. Let's go. Tell me what is teleological, egocentric functionalism.
And sure, and I just usually say TEF, and at this point, TEF has been really covered broadly. But I think the most important thing of TEF, or teleological egocentric functionalism, are the 3 rules or the 3 laws of transhumanism. And very briefly, they're not laws that the Transhumanist Party follows, and they're not necessarily laws that anyone should follow, but they're essentially laws that say you need to go after ultimate power as any kind of biological or living entity. You need to preserve that power, and then I'm kind of paraphrasing them really quickly, and that after you've accomplished all those things, then you need to be nice to the rest of the universe. And the laws are very controversial, and the philosophy is built upon those laws, and that's what's made the book, I guess, such a kind of cultish hit, is that it is something that most people don't like. In fact, even I don't necessarily always like the main character. It's something that was designed as a piece of art to challenge you, and so is the philosophy. I've often said that my book is designed for artificial intelligence. It's a bridge to artificial intelligence. My book will be a #1 bestseller when AI starts reading it, but not people, because people read it and they think, oh, this is so cold, so callous, and so authoritarian. But I think a machine would probably like my book very, very much.
Now, do you know what I say, Zoltan? I say I'm a futurist comic, which means my jokes are going to be funny in the future when the AI catches up. That's how I see it. So I'm with you. So now, interesting. What fired off for me was a Bodhisattvic vow, which the Bodhisattvic vow, for those that don't know, which is enlightenment for yourself and for all sentient beings, essentially, and not some kind of extraction from the world and then, well done, you're enlightened. Now, right, getting into that, where are you at with other religions? Because you mentioned about Christian and there. Have you influences with Buddhism or Hinduism or?
Yeah, I got to say I'm heavily influenced by Eastern just Eastern ideologies, I suppose.
Yeah.
Growing up, Hermann Hesse's Siddhartha was by far my most favorite book, and I still find it so absolutely important. In fact, even in my novel, the main, I guess the spouse who and the partner of the main character is completely opposed to most his authoritarian and sort of individualistic kinds of views, and she is sort of what I would call either a transhumanist Buddhist, someone who really believes in a greater spirituality, but using science and technology to achieve that. And I actually subscribe to a lot of those philosophies myself. I do believe that in the future we can find kind of a overall enlightenment for the species. Everyone can achieve it that has some type of advanced complexity of thinking. But I also I think what's going to happen is we're going to use technology and science to modify and enable us to reach those things. Right now, it's very hard to, for example, meditate for 24 hours straight and lose yourself in some type of perfect, I suppose, nirvana. But I think in the future, we're going to have brain chips and cranial implants and stuff like that that will allow us to have more spirituality. And I think Buddhism, Hinduism as well, maybe Confucianism, a lot of the non-Abrahamic religions will allow that type of spiritual transformation through technology and science. I just don't know if Christianity, Islam, or some of the other more prominent Abrahamic kind of faiths are ever going to embrace it, because it just does go against so much of what you're trying to talk about by using science and technology to empower yourself. But I do believe Buddhism and Hinduism and Taoism, some of those other ideas, and I'm half a religion major, so I think those are great things. I look forward to seeing how transhumanism merges with those philosophies.
Awesome. Okay, now we're talking about AI as well. You mentioned about that. When do you think, or do you think, looking at Kurzweil, do you think we're looking at 2035, 2030? When are the machines going to be so intelligent that we're going to have to merge with them? What's your timeline on this?
So I'm a bit more optimistic than Kurzweil. I think 2045 is an awesome timeline, but I'm going to say something closer to 2038, 2040. Everyone that I'm talking to in the field of artificial intelligence right now, and living in San Francisco, having access to a lot of cool people that are dealing with that, say if enough money is spent, we're gonna arrive there quicker. And it's not like
and this is really getting to that singularity point.
Yes, exactly. And I think what's going to happen, and this is the danger, again, going back to the conflict of my campaign and stuff like that, is that I think at some point people are going to shut down the research on artificial intelligence, because we have so I've written a number of things about artificial intelligence. For example, I've written about a Jesus singularity where, we go through a singularity that's religious inspired, even though it's with artificial intelligence. I've also written about, one nation trying to achieve artificial intelligence first, so that they can then dominate the rest of the world, because whoever gets it first will be able to rehack all the codes, nuclear codes. They'll have a dominance that no other country will ever have again, probably. So it's very interesting, but I think at some point the world is probably going to back off and say, wow, do we really want an entity that is smarter than us on the planet that we can't control? And I think at some point in 10 years you'll see a huge discussion in the governments around the world, and they'll probably pull back and say, maybe it's not in our best interest. I'm not saying I'm for or against that at all. I just I do see a conflict over it arriving, because I do think introducing a species that smart is a very dangerous game. Even though I'd love to see it, I'd love to tap my brain into it. I think the most important thing about artificial intelligence is the connection between cranial implants, ourselves using artificial intelligence in our own minds and connecting and merging with it, like downloading, like Kurzweil suggests. That's fascinating. Then maybe we can have an AI and be the AI, so we can launch the AI as well. Cool.
Okay, now you reminded me, because I laugh at Elon Musk. It's kind of like, anything that could go wrong, he's like, I can see things go, and he's got the Mars stuff there. Would you go to Mars? Would you want to end your 800 years? Would you want to be on another planet? Because this is something that you talk about in transhumanism, is colonizing. So let's get off this planet for a little bit. Where are you at with that? What do you think needs to happen for us to spread our intelligence?
From an existential risk point of view, it makes a lot of sense to actually try to get off the planet and have the species. And this kind of goes back to the 3 laws of transhumanism in my philosophy, which is you should pursue colonizing other planets as just a safety measure for the existence of the species itself. Now, that doesn't necessarily do much for you and I if you and I are here, but it's a nice thought to think, well, at least should the solar flare kind of burn half the planet or something crazy like that, I mean, who knows, or an asteroid hit us, or just some virus wipe us out, it'd be nice if there would be something else out there. So we do advocate for that, but we also understand that sending a few hundred people into space is not going to make that big of a difference to 7 billion people on the planet who want to get out of poverty, who want to fix the environmental problems of the planet, who want to have better lives, live longer, better health. So we actually, while we advocate for space exploration, it's not a huge platform of ours. Much bigger platform is trying to make, like, for example, universal basic income is a large platform of ours. And trying to, one of the big campaign promises is, vote for me and I'll make you live forever. It's my goal is to take money away from foreign wars and put it directly into life extension research and into science. And, and I mean trillions of dollars. And that would be the kind of country I'm aiming, or that's kind of what transhumanists is trying to do, create a transhumanist-inspired planet.
Awesome. Okay, let's now come back to you personally. How are you doing on the presidential campaign? I mean, you said you have the death threats going on, and I guess it's been a great ride as well, because you're getting affirmation that what you're talking about, people are receiving it well. How do you feel about it all?
So it's going much better than I thought, I'll be honest. We are growing much quicker than I thought. There's much more publicity around it than I would have ever thought. So your viewers know I've openly stated from the very first, opening article I did on it, my declaration, that I wasn't going to win, and that the Transhumanist Party wasn't going to win, and that we shouldn't look at it in terms of winning, because to even get on state ballots is such a difficult process and takes so many millions of dollars to do it in certain states that you really need a huge amount of resources to pull it off. But there are a number of ways to run, for president and make an impact and move a movement forward, and that's been our main goal, is to try to use the presidential campaign as a vehicle. And I got to be honest, I'm trying to set myself up for a much better run in 2020 or 2024 when this world that we're talking about, the transhumanist world, will be much more here. Right now it's here, we're doing a video conference thing and we have all these tools, but I think in 8 years, a lot of us will be chipped. A lot of us will maybe start be thinking about replacing our arm with a robotic arm. Okay, that's in 10 years, that's too early, but 15 years, I do believe that robotic hearts and robotic arms will be better than human arms, and people will electively take them off. And so all this will require some type of leadership that is willing to look beyond Social Security, the typical issues, taxes, international affairs. I mean, those are the things that Hillary Clinton and Jeff Bush talk about all day. But what I'm talking about, what the Transhumanist Party talks about, is some radical stuff. We want to get real-time voting, where you can vote on your app. You don't need to all this paperwork. That's why half the people don't vote. So we're talking about using technology and science to radically change the structure of how we put people in power, and also how those people in power do things. If everyone's going to live longer, well, obviously that changes Social Security dramatically anyways. So we should probably stop talking about Social Security and trying to keep it alive. We should talk about how we can create a system where everyone can be living with at least a basic income indefinitely. And again, that's why I support universal basic income over trying to band-aid Social Security together. Because in the world that we're living in the generation born today, I would be very surprised if people born today end up dying, or if they end up dying before 250 years old. I mean, it's when you look at the J curve of how people are from the 1900s to now, you and I we have a very good shot of not biologically dying anymore. So, things are changing. I think our politicians need to address that, and that's what we're trying to address, and what I try to address in my campaign. And I think that's why it's been so successful, is people are hearing not the same old political rhetoric, but they're hearing brand new ideas. And yes, it's a little bit too futuristic, but it's going to be here in about 2020, 2024. And I think that's when this party might really explode and become something mainstream.
That's awesome. Have other politicians been talking about it?
Politicians don't want to take it seriously. They want to say, oh, it's just some, little party and some guy, talking crazy stuff. The problem is, I mean, imagine, for example, I always say this. Let's get Hillary Clinton to talk about designer babies. The Chinese, about 10 days ago, announced that they had been, editing the genome. So now we essentially are into the designer baby age. But if you think abortion is a hot topic, think about how designer babies is. No politician wants to touch that, and yet the age is already here. So this is what I think why politicians want to kind of discount it, is because it's very scary for them to ask themselves. For example, we have proposed that all education should be free and that people should go to college. There should be a law kind of making everyone go to college. And the reason we say that is because when America made, the education, or even England, how long you had to go to education, most of the laws were built in the 60s or in the 50s. And so as a result, people go from age 5 to 17 to high school, and that is legally required in most countries around the world. But now that people are living almost twice as long, and soon will be living twice as long, maybe we ought to also make education longer. But these are thorny topics, because it would make sense as a species that we say, well, if we live longer, we should become more educated. That's kind of been one of the foundations of being a human being. But of course, it's so thorny, because then you get all the people saying, you're mandating this, and you're forcing this, and you're this kind of authoritarian stuff. And I tend to subscribe to many libertarian ideas, but some of my ideas have been, I guess, pretty much opposed to it. So it's a balance between getting these ideas out and also getting politicians to talk about them and to get them to take them seriously. So far, they just want to push them aside and say, you're getting me in trouble. Don't get me in trouble.
No, I get that. Now, you've triggered off a thought about Star Trek, because there was a signal, because some of these things have been dealt with in science. Favorite science fiction things? Movies, series?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm embarrassed to tell you how many times I've watched Matrix. So and I think it's one of the most brilliant, and just I'm a big believer in simulation theory. I did my senior thesis in philosophy at university in this topic, and I realized back then that there's a very good chance the universe is a simulation. I'm a big believer that the singularity has probably already been reached a long time ago by some advanced artificial intelligence. Yeah. There are 2 billion planets in the universe that are life-friendly. The universe itself is almost 14 billion years old. To think that we are the very first species to arrive at this level of intelligence is so egomaniacal. It reeks of ego. And I think that the truth is we're probably just one of millions of species that have made it, and millions of species that are probably at least thousands more intelligent than us. And the point I'm trying to say is that it throws in this entire weird kind of thinking when I try to go in the real world and deal with people, because here I am trying to tell everyone, like, we should live longer, we should live better with technology and science, but at the same time there are some very strong metaphysical concepts coming up, especially based on some recent string theory research from physicists, that suggests that the world is much different than we actually think. Yeah. That maybe you and I have, without being a new age person, because I'm not a new age kind of person. I'm a science-minded philosophy guy. I look at the facts, and the facts are sort of overwhelming. But I do believe that we are coming to an age when the discussion of who we are as a species is going to explode, and our idea of intelligence, our idea of reality, especially with virtual reality, holographic realities coming, is going to increase our opinion of ourselves and our opinion of the universe dramatically. And this will restructure kind of everything about how we think, I think.
And it's not the first time that's happened, is it? This is the thing, is that this keeps on happening. We're not there as a species. We keep on going, there's more to it. We got it wrong, everyone, we got it wrong. As we move forward.
We always get it wrong, and I think that's the funny thing, is we always think we're right, but I think the key, at least in science, I love the scientific method, because it's the best thing. It's just, you're never right, but you use a logical path to always get further and to try to discover something new, and hopefully that new thing you discover helps the species live longer and better and more fundamentally kind of scientific minded. But we are always wrong, and you're finding this out about health all the time. 10 years ago, coffee's bad. Now it's good, but in 10 years it'll be bad again. And the point is, like, we're fine-tuning our knowledge, and we're going to be doing that for a long, long time. As soon as we have machines like artificial intelligence that we can tap into, we're probably very quickly going to learn how much more complex the human, how much more complex perception reality can be, because we'll be tying ourselves into a machine that might have 10,000 or even 1,000,000 times the computing power that our brains have. And people forget our brains weigh 3 pounds. So there's a lot more to the universe, than our 3-pound brain. So I think the future is outstanding, and just there's so much to discover. And again, it doesn't really mix into my political campaign, but I like to use some of this metaphysical stuff as a way to say the future is really exciting. It's just not about taxes anymore. It's just not about school systems or this. It's about something really dynamic with the human species. We aren't really the human species. We're becoming something incredibly complex, and we should embrace that, because that's what makes the universe so exciting.
And that's great. I like your view. It's good. If I was American, I'd vote for you. Okay, Peter, do you have any questions? I'm just going to come to the event thread in a second. Go for it, Peter.
One observation, Zoltan, is that the Kurzweil theories presume that just by adding computing power, we can overtake the human brain in terms of what it can do. And I don't subscribe to that view. I think our creativity, our randomness, our weirdness are things that computers actually can't do. What they can do is make us use our time better. They can help us to find stuff. They can help us to link stuff together. And I buy all of that. But I'm not sure they're going to out-evolve us in terms of intelligence as such. Do you have a thought on that?
Well, so I think the idea of randomness and creativity is fascinating, because I hear this a lot, that it won't necessarily, we'll just have a machine that thinks like a machine. But I actually think AI will probably program chaos, randomness, and creativity into itself just through programming anomalies. I mean, I do this all the time with myself. I'll hide an ice cream from myself when I, hoping I won't find it later after a couple of scotches. We all do tricks to ourselves, and I think the machine may do that in order to make itself more creative in a way that isn't purely logical. Because you're right, computing power is not the same thing as humans and their creativity. I think it's our creativity, our randomness. In fact, it's our malice sometimes, our just absolute pure buffoonery that has made us great, because we see the things we do as mistakes or as good things, and then we can learn off that. It's not just a straight race course. The race course is kind of all over the place, and sometimes crosses into other race courses, and then it arrives us at a point when we're actually have learned something. But I think machines will probably mimic the human brain in terms of how to be crazy, how to be random, how to be make mistakes, and that will be an important part of its own ability to be creative.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And if you take, for example, Watson, when you first bring Watson to a new domain of discourse where it needs to learn things, you need to give it a fairly good boot up the backside to get it going into its learning mode and do what we used to call knowledge engineering in my old AI days, just to get it started. Once it gets going, it can then, because of its NLP, natural language processing abilities, it can read and consume vast amounts of documents and unstructured data and all the rest of it. So it becomes quite good at getting a body of knowledge together and reasoning across that. But that's still not the same thing as human intelligence. It's
I'm going to move us, because there's a few things here that come up, and a couple of people. So, DeepMind was the first one. With Google bought DeepMind. Did you see that? Did you see it playing the Atari game? Which entertained me no end. Zoltan, did you?
I briefly saw and heard about it, but yeah. I don't know that much about it. But I've been following the purchases and stuff. Like that.
Well, it ties into what Peter was saying. It's just like it learns the basic process of what the rules are of the game. And then it found essentially a loophole, and it managed to break through the side and knocked out everything from the top. And then it's like, well, next time I'm playing the game, I'm just going to go for what I learned was a quicker way, and and it just learns the process. But it took around about 600 goes to get to that point, and it's just a little thing. It's one of my. It's a very clever system that they've got there, which they're going to be applying to Google Plus. They've said they're going to have it in there. So whether it be sentiment analysis or whatever, I don't know. First thing. Second thing, what you triggered off for me. Are you familiar with Stanislav Grof? You know Stanislav Grof? He was an LSD psychotherapist, government funded for years. But when you're talking about the AI, and we're talking, I love this little territory, and you're talking about simulation theory, he always talks in terms of this is God's almost joke. This is the ultimate hide and seek game. From his point of view, is that we lose ourselves, we throw ourselves into matter in order to find ourselves because we're bored. That's the short version of it from Grof. And these things are deep philosophical viewpoints, and they tie back into Hinduism, they tie back into Buddhism and stuff. So you're raising questions through the technological realm that are actually about the nature of reality. And I think that's why it is a brave thing that you're doing, but I think it's awesome because you're doing it from a political point of view, so I don't have to do it from a kind of weirdy religious point of view. I can just put stuff out once in a while, which is great.
Yeah. No, well, thank you. And I agree. It is, I just think what's happening is technology has become almost like a drug, like a super LSD. And I think LSD experimentation is great as well. I actually think probably everyone on the planet should do it once, because it is to go outside your mind like that and see something new at least once will show you how small we really are, how little we understand about ourselves. It always shocks me how you can just have one little drop of a drug and one's personality changes, or one sees things they've never seen. You see different shades of colors. And it's constantly a reminder to me of how the human mind must try to reach out, to grow, and to do things. And I'm hopeful that in the future we'll have more of a culture that embraces that type of thing through technology. Because if you tell someone, hey, on the streets, if you say I'm going to take LSD and expand my consciousness, you can get arrested. But if you go into a university and say we're going to expand your consciousness through a brain implant that does very similar things, it's no longer legal. Now it's scientific. Now it's probably something that the government would be very interested in. So this is one of the reasons why I think technology and science is so great, because it allows us a kind of, it just is credible, and we can move forward expanding our consciousness without freaking out most people's, I guess, religious mores or some of their cultural constructs, or things like that they have. When you do it from another point of view, you just get yourself in trouble. But I'm hopeful that there'll be more experimentation along these lines as people start messing with the human brain. I was excited about how Obama put forth the brain initiative. I think these kind of things are exactly what I would like to see the world doing again and again and again.
Awesome. Great. Last section, just picking up a couple of questions. People say they'd love to join, but they can't. They love Stan Grof as well. It's great. Okay, so Nikki's got a question. Assuming you were elected as president, maybe not this time, maybe a few times ago, what would you want to achieve as a transhumanist? What goals do you have that would be achievable now rather than in the future? Good question.
Sure. Well, we have three goals mainly that we are emphasizing. And the first is that we would, if I was in office in a year's time or a little bit more than a year's time, I would immediately downsize the military, and instead of this military-industrial complex, we would shift the money towards kind of a scientific or medical industrial complex. It's not that I want to take away jobs or take away money from America. It's that I just want to shift the money from making bombs into making robotic hearts, into making artificial limbs, 3D printing, into drugs that allow us to live longer. And I'm not talking too many radical things. Everything I just mentioned is already here. I just want to spend the money on it. Like the exoskeleton industry is so small. It's a couple $100 million. It can solve many problems for disabled people and things like that. So we should spend money on that instead of making bombs in far off, unloading them in far off countries. The second thing is we want to spread a culture of transhumanism. I find it amazing that we still live in a country that really is so religious, that honestly believes that as soon as you die, you're going to meet this, play harps in heaven and stuff. I think it would be important to me to try to spread a culture that says you can hold your religious values, but it can't be so tied to fundamentally believing into a book 2,000 years ago. You know, let's open ourselves and say maybe God exists, but let's find him through science and technology, or him or her through science and technology, rather than something that is so fundamental. So spread a culture of transhumanism. And 3 is that I worry about existential risks. I really worry about an asteroid. I really worry about Ebola. I really worry about things like that. So I would very quickly spend a lot of money as the president on eliminating existential risks from the planet. It would be a shame to have some kind of virus take over, or some type of asteroid hit us, or something stupid happen that actually hurts the species itself when we are this advanced. I don't think people are taking it seriously enough.
Okay, right. Last couple of questions. I'm going to adapt to your question, Heidi, and let's talk about purists, let's say. So people who go, but technology, oh, I don't know if I'd want a chip, or I don't know if I'd want to remove my arm, because that's a big conversation. How do you respond to that when people challenge and say, oh, but being a human means that our technology stays outside of ourselves, for instance?
Well, you know, first off, there are so many millions and millions of people already that have technology inside themselves that are very, you know, they would not have thought they would have done that. I mean, first off, who doesn't have a cell phone in their pocket 24 hours a day, or at least most of the day, their waking hours these times? And there are artificial hips. We have dentures. You know, it's not. You don't want to look at it just necessarily as only cranial implants or something crazy like an artificial arm. It's technology is helping us to become better. We have cars, and we get in those cars. They become a part of our overall body in a way, because we use them to move. So I think when people get worried about that, it's important to see the long-term view. We were a species that started off using tools 10,000, 20,000 years ago very well, and now all of a sudden those tools have become our lives. And those tools are what make us have our lives in the way we are. Our computers, our pots, our cooking, anything like that. It all comes from this ability to use tools, and that's what transhumanism is. So having a brain implant, there's nothing sacred about the human body. You should see. I think people should try to open themselves up and say, well, we're just using more tools. But what's sacred is our minds, our version of ourselves, and that I don't think is necessarily going to change. I'm not willing to give up my version of myself, but definitely I'm willing to give up my physical being or my biological self. The biology is sort of like a coffin. It's just doomed to die, but we can replace it, we can fix it, we can change it, we can modify it, and we can become better.
Awesome. There we go, everybody. That was a fascinating session with Zoltan. Thank you to Peter. Thanks to everybody for watching. Zoltan, I wish you all the best. I think you're incredibly realistic with what you're setting out to achieve, and the timescales, you know. And I think raising awareness on things that you're right. The last few years, it's really lifting. People want these conversations now.
Yeah, they're very exciting to have. I think the world is changing. Literally, we're in such an exciting time.
Yeah. Well, wonderful. Well, thank you for taking time out from your presidential campaign. Look, I could get to say that. First time I've ever said that. I know everyone.
I'm going to go back to work on it.
Yeah, good stuff. Take care, sir. Thanks, everybody, for watching. See you soon.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Bye, Zoltan. Good luck.